Here we will take a look at subtracting decimals using a number line. This standard extends students' previous experiences with adding and subtracting whole numbers and their understanding of place value with decimals. This standard requires that students utilize models, drawings, and strategies based on place value rather than relying on algorithms. Here we're going to look at subtracting 8 and 752 thousandths from 12 and 4 tenths. To begin with, we'll make an estimate so that we could determine whether our actual answer is reasonable or not. 12 and 4 tenths, I'm just going to go ahead and round that to the nearest whole number for my estimate. I know that it is just 4 tenths away from 12, but 6 tenths away from 13, so it is a little closer to 12. So I can estimate this to be 12 minus, well, I know that 8 and 752 thousandths is close to 9 wholes, closer to 9 than it is to 8, so I will round that to 9. And I know that 12 minus 9 is 3. And so this lets me know that our answer should be around 3. I actually know it will end up being a little bit more than 3 since I rounded 8 and 752 thousandths up, and I rounded 12 and 4 tenths down just a little bit. So I'm going to use a number line. I'm just going to create an open number line here at the bottom. And then I am going to start with our 12 and 4 tenths here down to the right-hand side so that I can show my subtraction and move to the left on my number line as I subtract. So I'm going to subtract 8 and 752 thousandths from 12 and 4 tenths. Not all at once, though. I'm going to decompose this 8 and 752 thousandths. So first thing I'm going to do is just work with the whole number 8. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 8 wholes. So I'll show a jump where I'm going to subtract 8. And I know now I would be left with 4 and 4 tenths. Now, when I look at the number of tenths in the 752 thousandths, I see I have 7 tenths. Some of you may be able to mentally subtract 7 tenths from 4 and 4 tenths. Others may find it helpful to decompose that. I'm going to decompose that and just go ahead and take away 4 tenths at first so I can get to the friendly number of 4. So I'm going to subtract 4 tenths. And now I would be at 4 wholes exactly. Well, I still have 3 tenths to subtract until I've taken away the entire 7 tenths. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 3 tenths now. And again, you may be able to do this mentally in one jump, or you might have also needed to break it up just 1 tenth at a time. So I know if I subtracted 1 tenth from 4, I would be at 3 and 9 tenths. If I subtracted another tenth, I would be at 3 and 8 tenths. And then if I subtracted one more tenth, I would be at 3 and 7 tenths. So again, you might have been able to just subtract those 3 tenths altogether and get right to that 3 and 7 tenths, or you might have needed to do that 1 tenth at a time. Either way is perfectly fine. So now I can see that I have already subtracted, so our 8 and 752 thousandths, I've subtracted the 8 wholes, and I've now subtracted the 7 tenths in those 2 steps. Now I'm going to focus on the 5 hundredths. Well, when I'm looking at 3 and 7 tenths, it can be helpful to think about that as 3 and 70 hundredths, which it is equivalent to. That can help me subtract the 5 hundredths that I need to subtract. I know 70 hundredths minus 5 hundredths would be 65 hundredths. I'm going to go ahead and subtract the 5 hundredths now. And I would be at 3 and 65 hundredths. So now I've subtracted the 5 hundredths, and what I have left to subtract are the 2 thousandths there. So again, it might help to think about this in not just 3 and 65 hundredths, but think about it as 3 and 650 thousandths, because we need to take 2 thousandths away from that. Well, I know that 650 thousandths minus 2 thousandths would actually be 648 thousandths. So I can go ahead and subtract 2 thousandths, and I would be at 3 and 648 thousandths. And that is our final answer. That is the difference between 12 and 4 tenths and 8 and 752 thousandths. So the difference is 3 and 648 thousandths. I'll compare that to our estimated answer, which was 3. 3 and 648 thousandths is pretty close to 3. And if you remember what we said in the beginning was we actually expected our answer would be a little more than 3, just based on how we had rounded those numbers for our estimate. So again, this is how we can subtract decimals using a number line.